Hello, Canada, and welcome to CPL Final Week. I'm coming to you live from Calgary. Those two gentlemen will be coming in the days ahead. It's Oliver Platt and Gareth Wheeler here with you for a new episode of One Soccer Today. The talk of the Canadian soccer landscape is, of course, right now, well, a couple of things. The biggest or the jewel in the crown is the CPL final that will take place on Saturday in Calgary, Alberta. Also, the Whitecaps making a big splash against LAFC. That's to come on this episode of OST as well. But let's dive into our first taste of a final preview and a look back to begin. Oliver Platt with a CPL semifinal. It was Forge, it was Atletico Ottawa, and while Forge, they weren't at their very best, Ottawa basically out-metricing them, if I can use that as a word, across the board, just not getting the goal. Jas Kalelat stands on his head, and now we know that it's going to be Cavalry and Forge once again. Is the question to begin the show for you more on the lines of, was Forge so good in that they were able to find a way through without Borges, without Matusala, without Para? Or do you look at this more like a big missed opportunity for Atletico Ottawa?
Well, firstly, Adam, I love the One Soccer Mike sock in your backgrounds there. Great effort.
Thank you very much. I'm a traveling party. I'm doing my best.
I appreciate it. I do think it was more of a missed opportunity for Atletico Ottawa. I just don't know, when you go to Tim Hortons Field, you're going to get many better opportunities to beat Forge than they did this weekend. And to their credit, part of the reason I say that is the chances that they created. And in that second half, they did create enough to score and were denied by a brilliant performance from Jassim Kalelat. But I just felt that it took them a little bit too long to get going. I thought they were too cautious in the first half. Once again, created almost nothing in that first half. Early in the second half, Malik Owolabi-Bellew scores this go-ahead goal. And once you're behind against Forge in a playoff game, it's just extremely difficult. They gave it a good go from that point, like I said, and created a lot. But I just thought they had a Forge team that was in a position where if they'd adapted to the way Forge were playing, if they'd been a bit more positive and shown a bit more intent earlier on, I don't think that actually would have played into Forge's hands. I think it could have caused Forge problems, as we saw in that second half later on. So it's going to be one that's pretty sore and a little bit of regret, I think, that they just couldn't get going earlier in this game.
Wheels?
Kind of on the same page there. First, let's give our flowers to Forge. In a behind-the-scenes look in the Forge locker room, it was posted on Instagram, showed Bobby Smirniotis telling his boys that we're steel, like we're just unbreakable. And that's kind of the feel about this Forge side, is that they don't make mistakes that bury them. They're well managed. They simply don't make the errors that lead to the demise of certain teams. And even when they're not the best version of themselves, they're difficult to beat. But as Ollie was saying, this was a day where they played with Benny Badabanga as a number 9. There were so many balls that were played in front of him that maybe a more natural number 9 that wants to play behind the lines would get to. So it was kind of makeshift in that area. Not a makeshift player in Badabanga. He's very good, but that's not his standout role. They played without Tristan Borges, one of their best players. Didn't see the field to play. Without Garvin Matusala, a staple, a pillar of strength at center back. They played without a top left back and one of their best players on the season, Daniel Para, at left back. Like, if there was ever a time to go to Tim Hortons Field and go out on the front foot and really press to win a game, it would have been then on the weekend. So I think that if you're Atletico Ottawa, you need to look back and say, what if? What if they could have found a way to have some sort of attacking presence? They didn't bring Ruben Del Campo into the game at all. Balou Tabla, like players like this, it's a story of their season. At the beginning of it, you thought that, wow, Carlos Gonzalez and Atletico Ottawa found a way to bring this collection of very talented players together and really get on the same page. But they reverted back to old tactics. This 3-5, even Bobby Smirniotis called it like 9 or 10 behind the ball. They resorted to a defensive system where they couldn't get into any flow or rhythm in terms of their attacking football. And that's exactly what played out on the weekend. They had to go there and score a goal. Like Pacific did in the 2021 final, but the fact that some good goalkeeping and just not enough opportunities created end up costing them on the day. So I think that Ottawa will look back on this with great disappointment of what could have been. And Forge, it's more of the same. Take your best shot at us, but no matter who we put on the field, we're still the top side. And I think that's their mentality, and that will be the mentality going through the final as well.
Remarkable that every single CPL final has been contested by Forge. They have, of course, won 4 of them, looking for number 5 this week. And we will save a lot of our direct look ahead to the final for Thursday's show. And Ollie, since Gareth sort of brought us to the maybe diagnosis of what went wrong with Atletico Ottawa, or at least what the problems were, the symptoms that were showing, let's maybe go on to a prognosis then. We know that they're going to meet with the media tomorrow. That's Tuesday, depending on when you're watching this, the 5th of November. They'll have their end of season avail, locker clean out, that type of deal. But what I find interesting, and KJ Christian Jack being an intrepid journalist as he is, the last question he asked Carlos Gonzalez in the post-match, immediate aftermath of losing to Forge, will we expect to see you back next year? And with a smile, I think Carlos Gonzalez said the only thing that he could say, and that's ultimately that decision is out of my hands. You know, they lost Fernando Lopez midseason to Zaragoza. They have Carlos Gonzalez, and I think every time you've failed to meet expectations, there's questions, and there's already been players rumored to be out the door for sales and other moves. So I know silly season is just beginning, but what do you think this offseason is going to look like? And do you think Carlos Gonzalez could or should be back behind the bench next year?
Yeah, I don't know because, for some of the reasons you outlined, it's difficult to say like who's going to make that decision and what's the mandate right now going into next year for Ottawa with Fernando Lopez no longer there. What I'll say about Carlos Gonzalez is I think he's come under some criticism at times. He's had some pointed questions to deal with at times, around style of play and all of these different things, as seems to have been the case ever since he got to the Canadian Premier League. Let's give him his due. I think over 3 seasons, 2 of them they've been in contention for both trophies. No one else can, apart from Forging Cavalry, can really say that, like that they've sustained that over multiple seasons in the course of CPL history. Maybe Pacific, you could say, obviously around the title season and James Merriman's first season. But generally speaking, teams have been kind of one and done in terms of how they've been able to get up and compete with Forging Cavalry. It hasn't been the case with Atletico Ottawa under Carlos Gonzalez. All of that being said, I think clearly this season at times he's cut a pretty frustrated figure with some of the things he said in the media, complaints he's had in the media. There does seem to be a bit of a disconnect at times between his style of play and what the club wants or what the supporters want. They've moved a couple of times towards trying to be a bit more open and expansive, but it's never really lasted. And they've kind of always reverted when it matters most to I think, what he's most comfortable with. So again, it comes back to, who's making that decision? What do they want? What's the identity of this club, the expectations in terms of aesthetics and not just results? And I think that's going to drive this decision. But look, 3 years as a manager at one club is a pretty long time. And, I think it's probably fair to say it's up in question right now who's going to be taking them forward next season.
And he was manager of the year in 2022. I
Yeah.
think he's really brought something to the table here. My bigger question is in terms of alignment, and that comes from a philosophical perspective. How does this team want to play? I think it's quite clear what Carlos Gonzalez wants to play, but the recruitment in the offseason weren't players that, for me, would fit that style of play that they kind of reverted to at the end of the year. Like a number of players, Santos, Twardek, fitting Ollie Bassett in this team at times. Like it just seems like there was a real imbalance in this team, and maybe too many cooks, as my good friend Jordan Wilson called it. Like they need to decide like what sort of identity they want to embody. Like it doesn't always need to be flash and dash and the the best football from a visual perspective, unless that's what the fans and unless that's what they demand. But there needs to be alignment in terms of recruitment and what that head coach is all about. If not, it's going to kind of end up like this. And I feel bad saying it's just an underwhelming season, despite the players, because of the players that they brought in. Like I just feel like this group had more to offer, but because I don't think there was that alignment, you kind of end up like this, a good, not great scenario.
All right. Well, with that, it is officially curtains on the incredible career of Maxime Tissot. So that is definitely worth a tip of the cap to Captain Maxime and all he's done for football in that local community. And he will certainly be one of the faces not returning next year. It will be a fascinating offseason, like it will for all teams, even though two that are still standing. And that is something we will continue to monitor right here on One Soccer today. So we'll shelf the Canadian Premier League for now. We will return with plenty more, we assure you, in the lead up to the final. 1 p.m. Mountain Time, 3 p.m. Eastern at Cofield Saturday. It is live on One Soccer, of course, as well as the CBC. We cannot wait for it. I'm going to do a callback next to our tonybet top picks on Thursday's show, where we asked the question, or just before the tonybet top picks, actually, about Vancouver Whitecaps' odds of winning their game at home. I think Gareth said 33%. I think Ollie said 49%. I was at 66%. So just remember, Caps fans who believed in your club, because they are still fighting. They are still alive. Gareth Wheeler, I know there's a lot we can dive into, a lot of meat on this bone here, from the playoff format to the performance to the attacking lineup to Vanny's post-game sound. But ultimately, their season continues and they got a little bit of swagger back. What do you think?
Swagger, that's a word for it. I'm entirely impressed by what we saw with the Vancouver Whitecaps on Sunday night. I don't think that many people gave them a chance but themselves. And Vinny Sartini did the trick. I think he took a significant risk heading into this game, playing such an attacking formation and the players that he kept on the field. He had Armstrong, Ahmed, White, Guld. He just kind of basically the big choice was keeping out a Laborda or an Utvik out of the starting 11, and he did that. Bearhalter stepped in. I thought he played outstanding on the game. And this team applied pressure from the get-go. The knock on Vancouver Whitecaps was that they were a better team away from home on the season than they were at home. But was the epitome of stepping up. But I felt this game really wasn't in doubt. And there's been flaky moments by LAFC over the course of the season in terms of their form. It's just over the last month and a half, they've been the best side in Major League Soccer. And Vancouver, to be fair, made them look second rate. I thought Vancouver were completely in control the vast majority of that match. It was an outstanding performance, but one that was dictated by the squad, by the team selection, by the manager. I know Sartini, when he gets behind a mic, obviously he is absolute gold. He's wonderful to listen to. His God analogies again after this one, it's charming as can be. Even when you might disagree with him, it's just his own panache and what he brings to the table is wonderful. But let's give him some credit for what he was able to do on the field. This Whitecaps team, if they play this way, Adam, like the data and the metrics might not represent it, but I think they got a real chance in this game. Like LAFC, like they're not playing Ilya Sanchez. He's not in the team. Atuesta not in the team. Like the squad selection by Bocanegra, I have some questions about how some of the players have been able to fit into that system. Clearly, they're more talented. Like this, I would make the argument they're the most talented side in Major League Soccer. Yet, I mean, the Whitecaps, just in terms of the mentality, the way the team was set up, and their front, they're just being on the front foot in terms of their approach, it was outstanding. Sartini, this club, these players led by Ryan Guld deserve a lot of credit. And here we go. The format might be ridiculous, but they're playing to the rules. If it was an aggregate tie, they would be moving on. We should point that out. Like everyone else approaches playoffs in world football aside from Major League Soccer. Let's hope that doesn't come back to bite the Whitecaps come the second leg, because they are right in this tie.
But alas, Oliver Platt, the gate sales for LAFC for the match 3 will be through the roof. I'm sure Major League Soccer will be thrilled.
Well, I was just going to say congrats to the Whitecaps on their 4-2 aggregate win on Planet Normal, but unfortunately this tie is being played on Planet MLS, and so we go back for game 3. Look, I thought the Whitecaps played extremely well in this game, and that Whitecaps team, is a threat to anyone in this Western Conference. And the encouraging thing now is we've seen it against Portland in the opening game. We've seen it here in the second game against LAFC. Ryan Guld is playing out of his skin. Like, you can't ask for more from a DP than you're getting from him right now in the 2 games they've won in these playoffs so far. Andres Cubas was excellent last night as well. Like Will said, the decision by Sartini to get so many attacking players on the pitch really paid off and allowed them to play on the front foot as they're always at their best. So when it clicks under Sartini, I think tactically he's like an interesting coach, and he does some things differently, I think, than a lot of managers in terms of how he sets his teams up. When it clicks, it can look very good in terms of the way they press, the way they connect, and play through the lines. And last night was one of those nights. So fingers crossed they can reproduce that in LA, and if they do, they've got an excellent chance.
Well, the Canadian champions, well, they got that first playoff win under Sartini. They got a second win under Sartini. And I mean, I'm curious what the odds will look like when they come out just ahead of the weekend. But you have to imagine that the Caps are in the punter's chance, and we can't not wait for game 3. Even if we don't necessarily agree that there should be
Both
a game
teams
3,
to
we'll be
score.
tuning in
Definite
for
play.
it. Yes, both teams to score, I think, is a slam dunk. We'll stay in Major League Soccer and slightly pivot away from the Canadian clubs, but stay with a little Canadian content because we want to talk about Dane Sinclair, who made not one, but 2 saves against Real Salt Lake, one of the big favorites on that side of the bracket as Minnesota United progress. And with Suriname, Gareth, just around the corner in Nations League, I think a lot of people are seeing Sinclair, not just in this match, not just this penalty shootout, but how he's been playing lately, that swagger. I know the Vince Carter "it's over" was a little bit controversial to some, but I think it was the same day Vince was getting his number retired. But I like it. I like a keeper
Don't get
with a
him
little bit
started on
of
that.
FU mentality. What do you make of Sinclair, and are you expecting to see him starting for Canada the next time we have the Canadians in action when they're in Suriname?
I don't think it's controversial whatsoever. It's over. It's just old man Wheeler shaking his fist at all the Vince Carter tributes. But that's a story for another day. If you're watching that shootout live, Sinclair was bold and brash. He was getting up in the face of the RSL players. If there was a difference maker in this series between Minnesota and Real Salt Lake, it was Dane Sinclair, the Great Dane. Like, honestly, he was this right here. Like, it wasn't over at that time, but he basically called a shutout like Kenny Smith. These two sides, I believe, have drawn the last 6 times that they played. And then you needed someone like Sinclair, 2 saves in the penalty shootout, and Minnesota goes on. This is what, if I'm Jesse Marsh or any purveyor of Canadian football, you're trying to look for an emergence of one of these 2 goalkeepers. On the balance of the MLS season and the teams that play in front of them play a big role in that story, but all the data and the metrics sided with Dane Sinclair as being the superior goalkeeper between him and Maxime Crepeau over the course of the season. And I think Sinclair is showing his worth. I don't think he's been poor whatsoever for Canada. I think that he's going to be right in the mix down to the wire in 2026. And I don't think that position is anywhere near from being decided. But at performances like this, allowing Sinclair to play in more big games, all of this bodes well for him. I rate the player. I think that his profile is very good. Once he develops like a little bit more consistency, like he's been consistent this season, by the way, but a little bit more consistency. He's working under a good manager in Eric Ramsey. I like what he's brought to the table in Minnesota United. I think there's a real player here. So I'm thrilled for Sinclair. Minnesota's going to be up against the Galaxy. Joveljic, Peck, Puig, like they are loaded. Paintsill, like this Galaxy team is loaded. So the next challenge is going to be a much bigger one for Sinclair, but that was a statement moment and a very memorable one from the first round of the MLS Cup playoffs.
Ollie, do you concur?
I concur in the sense that I think Sinclair is going to get another chance in the coming months to stake a claim for that job. We got to remember, right, who Jesse Marsh started in his first game for Canada, and it was Dane Sinclair, and Crepeau came in and played excellently against France and took the job based on those 2 games. So I think there are reasons to give Sinclair another opportunity, to lean towards the idea that maybe he is a younger goalkeeper, has more upsides in the long term. He's a very athletic goalkeeper. I also just think, though, and I've said this for years, going back to like when we were talking about should it be Milan Boyan or Crepeau, I've never seen Crepeau let Canada down. And I think he's an excellent goalkeeper who doesn't always get the credit he deserves. He's had different moments in terms of his club form over the past few years, whether it's been, leaving Vancouver to go to LA, whether it's this season in Portland's probably not having the season he would have wanted. None of it's really impacted the way he's played in a Canadian jersey, where I can't remember him having a bad game. So I think you have to give him that respect and that credit that when it comes to the national team, he performs. And for me, he's still the incumbent and it's his job to lose.
Okay, can I ask you a question though, Ollie?
Maybe.
Crepeau hasn't played for the balance of, he didn't play the playoff game, and Pantemis was playing. So Crepeau hasn't played for Portland for quite some time. We're heading into an international window in home and away against Suriname. Sinclair's playing at a top level right now. Like, what direction do you go? Does he go back into the direction of Dane Sinclair for these upcoming 2 games? I think it's a relevant conversation to be had. Meanwhile, Max Crepeau's training with all the other offseason MLS and CPL players in Toronto this week. It has to be something that you consider.
It's relevant. I think it would be more relevant if it was an outfield player, like a goalkeeper. I don't know that the match fitness and match rhythm aspects, especially
You
as
don't
he's
think
in
so?
camp with Jesse Marsh right now, I don't think that plays as big a part. But like, I'm not saying that there's not a debate to be had. Of course, there is, the way Sinclair has been playing.
All right. Well, listen, any manager you talk to will always tell you they love competitions, they love battles. It's a good problem to have. It's different than years gone by, I think, just the overall feeling of who's going to be in the net, match in, match out. We got 2 great ones in Canada, and unrelated, but watching those highlights again, and every time I watch the clips from on social media in the first place, we would love to have more games for our men's national team out west, for both of our national teams, quite frankly. But if we insist on playing the Americans on American soil all the time, put a game in Minnesota and make it accessible to Western Canada, because that crowd
Just not
looked
in January.
incredible. Just maybe not in
Feet
January.
freeze.
Although the Azteca, it was fun. I don't know. We got to replicate it, but I'm just saying Minnesota be a decent spot for USA v Canada friendly. Let's stay with the national team as we move into today's Visa Women's Football Report. Presented by Visa, this is the Women's Football Report. Christine Sinclair played her final regular season match professionally for the Portland Thorns. It was a day full of tributes, and it was a day that saw another Christine Sinclair goal. The first 100th, 150, and 200th and final regular season match of her professional career. She scores a goal in all of them, fitting for Canada's greatest of all time. And as companies like to do, try to capitalize on a little lightning in a bottle. We've seen Budweiser do something similar in the past. Nike had some gifts for goalkeepers that have played against Christine Sinclair in the past, basically congratulating all of those keepers on the fact that Christine Sinclair is retiring, saying it's a great day to be a keeper. Ollie, this was obviously a big moment, a cool moment always to see the brands, especially one like the Swoosh, getting involved with Canadian talent. But for Sinclair to score again, the ovation she received, sending that stadium into rapture again, and just the tributes that have flown in. I know she's not done yet. She's got the playoffs still to go. But what did you make of everything from this weekend?
I thought watching the goal, it was a very well taken goal, very calm, clearly, and like a striker who's scored a few of those before. That player could probably bag a few in the NSL next season. That's always what on my mind when I see Christine Sinclair playing
Stop
and
it.
scoring,
Stop it.
even now. But like, yeah, it's great to see. It was a cool moment to see her obviously mark that final regular season match, and I think they kind of build it as her retirement match with a goal. And now the opportunity to go into the playoffs, and maybe a few more pages left in the story left to write. So all the best to her and Jesse Fleming, Rob Gale, Stephen Hart, obviously a strong Canadian contingent on that Thorns team in the NWSL playoffs.
Well, more so, obviously, Christine is adored coast to coast to coast in this country. I think that playing that game at home in Portland, the other place where she's left that indelible
Her
mark,
other home.
that's what matters. And seeing the response, the Nike, the tie there is, nearby Beaverton, Oregon is the home of Nike. And so they're very well aware of Christine and what she means in that market as well. This is the way that you retire and go out. And I'm happy that Christine has said that she's not going to do the Michael Jordan or anyone else coming back and retiring, then coming back in. I have questioned in the past whether she would play in the NSL or not, but this is the way you want to go out, scoring goals, still productive. That's how you step away rather than a figure that's, on the periphery, struggling to find form. This is how you retire. So I'm thrilled for her. The branding, the outreach, the love, all of it has been a fitting tribute to a footballing legend.
And with that, Gareth dumps cold water on Ollie's Christine Sinclair to Vancouver Rise rumors that he's trying to start. All the best to Christine in the
I
playoffs. And
won't
as
stop.
Ollie mentioned, the Thorns contingent. And would you believe, gentlemen, we're actually light today, which never happens, which means we have a little bit of time to get a final thought, or at least an early thought. Let's frame it that way on the final. We said we were going to save it to Thursday. We have a couple of minutes to spare. First of all, I'm proud of both of you. How about you, Gareth Wheeler? Forge the favorite, Cavalry the favorite, or is there something else you're specifically tracking heading into Saturday's final?
I think that Cavalry are the favorite heading into this game because they're playing at home. And I think that this game is anything but a bonus to Tommy Wilden Jr. and company. Having not played in a final since 2019, where a lot kind of played against them, they could have gone and win that game in 2019. Being back home, we've addressed the question marks surrounding Forge. They're going to be difficult to beat, but also the lasting, lingering memory of how the North Star Cup was taken out of their fingertips last year in extra time after Ali Musi went off. Everything kind of fell apart. And I think it was more shock than anything else that Cavalry didn't win it last year. So I think the context, playing at home, I think a lot of that plays into Cavalry's favor. A reminder, Adam, we've addressed this. They played 31 games across their club histories. Only one game has been decided by more than a goal. That's outrageous. So it's going to be close. It's going to be a nail biter, but I give a slight edge to Cavalry heading into the final.
I'm going to leap in here just to say you want to talk about games and numbers, and that's a very salient point, Gareth. By my count, this is 43 for Forge on Saturday. From the start of the year, they're going to have like 6 weeks off before they got to get going again for CONCACAF Champions Cup. I just wonder if they have enough left in the tank to get up for Cavalry, who have been salivating at the opportunity for this for 2 weeks. And you think in a game where it was must win, a 1-goal game, Borges bench, Hamilton bench, Campbell bench. They used Kone, Kane, and a third substitute that had played less than about 50 matches in the CPL. The Benitez, thank you very much. It just, Ollie, to me, look, they until they win, it's always going to be Forge. You have to give them the credit that's due because they've just proven that they don't know how to lose. But I mean, maybe it's a little bit of copium or hopium, to what the kids say for the entertainment value of the game. But like, it's got to be Cavalry with the favorites this year.
Well, it's like it's the weirdest dynamic before a Forge Cavalry final or playoff game that I can remember, because like 2 weeks ago, nobody would have said that Cavalry are the favorites to win the North Star Cup.
Well, maybe not nobody.
I mean, okay, maybe if it was a very hot take if you were trying to claim that at the time off the back of Forge, you know, having potentially one of their best seasons ever. People were saying, is this the best CPL team of all time, right? Like, and there are reasons why it's kind of unraveled a little bit over the past couple of weeks with Para's suspension and some of the injuries that they've had. But I don't think anyone saw this coming. So yeah, I agree at home that Cavalry are slight favorites. It's just a very, very strange dynamic, the way that has completely flipped on its head over the past couple of weeks, to a point where it feels like Forge are just trying to kind of cling on and, you know, scrap to get an unlikely result here after dominating the regular season.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to watch and interact with both coaches, both players, or both sets of players this week. Excited to be in Calgary for it all, and we'll have on-the-ground coverage. Well, I'll get you something today. We got you this today, but the rest of the crew joining us on Wednesday, and it'll be wall-to-wall, including the CPL Awards on Thursday. The TonyBet top picks are next. Time to wrap up the show. Presented by TonyBet, these are our top picks right into Champions League action, Gareth Wheeler. I will assign to you Inter Milan plus 160 or Jordan Wilson's Gunners at plus 190.
Arsenal are falling apart, aren't they? Edu, the technical director's leaving the club. They lose again on the weekend. Honestly, no Odegaard, no party for them. For this game, I give Inter the edge, but I prefer both teams to score right at around even money for this one. Neither side has conceded a goal in the Champions League. So rather picking a side, I think it's going to be low scoring. The total set at 2.25. Inter scoring for fun in Serie A, but when it comes to Champions League football, low scoring draw wouldn't be the worst result for both sides. Both teams scored at just about even money.
Oliver Platt, Alistair Johnston, might he be captaining Celtic against RB Leipzig? Plus 220, the Dogs at home. Is there more Alistair Johnston magic?
I'd love to
No.
say so, but I'm more tempted by RB Leipzig at plus money in this game, unfortunately.
All right, our tonybet top picks for today. My thanks to you, the viewer, for joining us. For Oliver Platt, for Gareth Wheeler, and a crew behind the scenes, I've been Adam Jenkins. CPL Final Week is here, ladies and gentlemen. We're excited to bring you all the latest on